Hi, Stevie Lynn here. Do you know what this is? It looks like caramelized onions, right? Well, it's actually caramelized onions and cabbage. It is the most delicious thing in the world. I call it ambrosia. It is so good. It is sweet. It is jammy. It is decadent. It's amazing over gnocchi or spätzle, in a pierogi, in soups, over pasta. That's how we're going to have it tonight. So let's get started. I'm going to show you how I caramelize this cabbage, this onion. I'm going to caramelize them together, as well as anything else that can be caramelized by braising it in water before we actually caramelize it. Actually, it's a reverse braise because braise involves browning it and then simmering it in water. But what we're going to be doing is we're going to be simmering or steaming it in water and then browning it afterwards. We say caramelized onions, but that's only one reaction that it goes through. It also goes through the Maillard reaction and a few other reactions. But caramelization basically is a reaction between sugars. And Maillardization, I don't know if you could say Maillardization, but the Maillard reaction is a bunch of reactions, just like caramelization is a bunch of reactions. It's between reduced sugar, and it is a very complex process that nobody fully understands. It's not just a bunch of linear reactions. It's like a whole scribble of reactions. But what we end up with is jammy, complex, umami-rich, savory, beautiful ambrosia of the molecular gods. So let's nerd out a little bit more, just a little bit more. So like I said, the Maillard reaction is a bunch of reactions that occur between reduced sugars, amino acids, and proteins. And you might be asking, what are reduced sugars? Well, do you remember high school chemistry? Do you remember those incomplete molecules? Like those molecules that were lacking a proton or a neutron or something like that? I can't totally remember. An electron. Something like that. They were kind of incomplete, and they were just kind of going round and round and round trying to look for something or someone to complete them. And then once they found that something or someone, then they just got into like a little bondage, covalent bondage action or something like that. Well, reducing sugar is kind of like that. He's sweet, but he's also a little empty inside, which makes him promiscuous. Think fructose or sucrose or there's so many other sugars. Like, for instance, this cabbage contains about 13 different kinds of sugars. But if you really want to go down the Maillard reaction rabbit hole, all you need to do is Google Maillard, M-A-I-L-L-A-R-D. Some people, I think, pronounce it Maillard, but don't Google Maillard reaction, because we want to go down the rabbit hole, not the duck hole. Duck hole. Duck hole. To get the Maillard reaction going, you either need time, as in, for instance, black garlic is a result of the Maillard reaction, or you need heat, and you need a lot of heat. It needs to be between 284 and 330 degrees Fahrenheit. And if you're everywhere else but America, then that would be between 140 and 165 degrees Celsius. So now I know you're asking because you're smart, how are you going to caramelize or Maillardize these in water? Because water doesn't get that hot. It only gets to be about 212 degrees Fahrenheit. You can't possibly reach the 284 degrees with water. You were so smart to ask that question. The reason why we're going to cook these in water first, it's going to cook faster, because when you're caramelizing onions and cabbage, it takes a long time for them to wilt. So the water is going to help wilt it faster. The other thing is that the water is going to help draw out the sugars and the proteins and the amino acids so that they come to the surface and they are more easily browned. Once welted, it's going to conform to the bottom of the pan more, so there's going to be more contact with that heat, and that's going to facilitate even browning. And also, because we are already cooking it and welting it, we're not going to need as much fat, because if we try to welt it in fat, it's going to take up a lot of that fat in the process of cooking it. And then all the water is going to evaporate. Now we're going to cover it when we steam it and boil it, but then we're going to lift the cover, and all of that water is going to evaporate, and then we're going to be left with cabbage with all the goodies on the surface, just waiting to be browned. Now, I learned about this method from Lam Lam over at America's Test Kitchen. I did some further research via YouTube, just watching different channels of different chefs and cooks, and one who I really love is Helen Rennie. And so I got a lot of information from her. She's got a great cooking class, and I highly recommend her. And both of them said the wet onion is going to get really, really sticky, and so it's going to be more inclined to stick into the pan. But I know when I do this, the cabbage will buffer it somewhat. So they recommend to use a non-stick pan. But I don't have a non-stick pan. This is what I have. I have my cast iron. I have a really minimalist kitchen, and all I have is cast iron. So the way I'm going to handle that is I'm going to put a little bit more oil in this, and I am going to just babysit it. I'm just going to keep my eye on it. And I've done this before, and it works just fine. First thing I'm going to do is prepare my veggies. The way we're going to cut the onion is pull to pull. So I cut it in half. This is a sweet onion, by the way. I cut it in half, and now I'm just going to cut it this way. Because you want big chunks. You don't want the onion just to disappear. You don't want it to turn into a sauce. And now we can just put the onions right into the pan, because we're steaming it at first, so we don't have to wait for the pan to get hot. And it's a very simple recipe, basically using 1 large onion, 1 large cabbage, about 3 tablespoons of olive oil, and then I have a pat of vegan butter, which I'm going to put in later, and then some balsamic vinegar. I like to use balsamic vinegar. If you want to bring out the sweetness, you can add maybe some baking soda. Baking soda will make it more basic, like have a higher pH. Will make it more alkaline, and that will bring out its sweetness. It will also help the browning, actually, because the Maillard reaction is facilitated by a more alkaline environment. You can also add sugar to it at the very end. I personally just like to add balsamic vinegar, because I kind of like to foil the sweetness with a little bit of the balsamic. I'm not trying to make candy. Cutting these cabbage into like steaks, I'm gonna cut them into wedges. We're going to turn on the heat. I'm going to go high. I should be using this burner, but I want it to be close to you. I just want it to be close to you. Now I'm going to add some salt right off the bat as well. Put about a tablespoon in here. Putting about a half a cup of water in here. That doesn't feel like enough. I might put more in. And then a couple tablespoons of olive oil. Did I mention that you should probably core the cabbage? I didn't. I just went to chopping. Okay. There you go. And the one beautiful thing about plant-based cooking is you really can taste as you go. You don't have to worry about raw eggs and raw meat and things like that. There's so much you don't have to worry about when you have a plant-based kitchen. You don't have to worry about cross-contamination. It's just so much easier. Okay, so we're going to leave this for about 10 minutes, but I'm actually going to set the timer for 5 minutes because it's not a non-stick pan and it's more inclined to stick to the bottom of that pan. So I'm going to really babysit it. I keep checking it just to make sure there's enough water in there, and I did put oil in there, so nothing's sticking. It's good and wet. It's moist. Oh, it's pretty welty. I'm going to put a little bit more olive oil in it, just because I want to make sure it doesn't burn. So we want it to kind of conform to the bottom and the sides of the pan, so I'm patting it down. I'm just going to leave it for a few minutes so that I can brown at the bottom. I grab one of these so I can kind of lift a whole bunch and turn it around like at the bottom to see if it's browning. It is not browning yet. And I pat it all back down again. See how it looks. It's a while. It's still not browning. I'm going to turn the heat up a little bit more. I really should have it on this burner. It's better to be on the bigger burner. I want it to be closer to you. Pat it all down. We need it hot. 265 degrees. Woo. I'm so weird. You gotta let it go. You just have to leave it alone. Because it can't brown if you keep meddling with it. Okay, we're getting some browning. Balsamic. About a tablespoon. I'm going to put the vegan butter in. And we do that later because we don't want it to burn. Because it browns, that means it burns. I didn't know what browns in it. And I turned down the heat pretty low to medium low. If it were on this burner, my bigger burner, I would turn it down way low. I'm just gonna stay here and keep it moving. Chef's treat. This is so good. Well, that's it for today. I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope you got something out of it. I hope you learned something new. And remember, it is better to ferment love than to foment fear. That's right. Be fearless in the kitchen. Your fearlessness, I don't know what that was about. Your fearlessness will reward you. Thank you so much for watching this video. If you liked it or learned something, don't forget to like and subscribe and hit the bell button to be notified when I make a new video.